Good morning, Remax. Welcome to your OTP Essentials webinar. So I'm just going to hang for a few seconds here just to get everyone to join on the call, and then we'll get things going. So we have people that are rushing in here. We have almost 400 registered agents, brokers, broker managers, and admins that are going to be joining the call today, which is very cool. Always nice to upskill and educate ourselves, on this real estate journey. As you know, it's a roller coaster, and things are evolving, things are changing all the time. And we felt at Remax SA that it was so important for us just to go through OTP Essentials. And that's why we have this webinar, and we have some pretty awesome guests with us today. So to all our new agents, experienced agents, brokers, broker managers, and admins, a huge welcome to you all. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Ryan Pillay, and I head up the training at Remax of Southern Africa. This morning, we are very fortunate and privileged to have Kim Lovegrove and Delaney Janse van Rensburg from Boshoff Attorneys. So before we begin, just a few house rules. You should be on mute, but if you're not, please make sure you keep yourself on mute for the duration of the presentation. And if you have any questions, just write them down. And at the end of the presentation, we'll get Delaney and Kim to answer whatever questions you have. And in saying that, we'll only be taking a couple of questions. If you have any more questions after that, feel free to email me. And also, we'll obviously give you Kim and Delaney's email address, and they'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So in today's training, Delaney will be covering some very important points when it comes to OTP. So let me introduce Delaney and Kim. So Kim served as a judge's clerk in the High Court of Pretoria. She also has a right appearance in the High Court of Pretoria. Kim also heads up the Boshoff marketing department nationally, and together with a dedicated team of PROs, services many property practitioners. Kim also previously served as chair lady of the Old Girls Association for Pretoria Girls High. So for all those that are from Pretoria, maybe you know Kim already. I'm sure most of you know Kim and Delaney already. And she's got a very vast client database across the globe and has passion for property. So I'm going to find you, Kim, and get you just to come say hi quickly. Let's see where you are.
Thank you, Ryan. Morning, everybody. Just from our side, from Boshoff Attorneys, we'd just like to thank Remax South Africa. Ryan, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this webinar this morning. I think it's going to be a very informative session. Please feel free, as Ryan says, to ask questions at the end. Just a little bit about Boshoff Inc. 9 offices across the country nationally, predominantly a conveyancing practice. We do assist a number of you already, and for those of you that don't, you'll get to know a little bit about Boshoff this morning. So 9 offices nationally, each partner and owner run. We do specialize in property developments from sectional title to golfing estates, traverse rights, wildlife estates. We do assist a number of property practitioners across the country with training, in assisting with you to get you compliant as well. And we're very privileged to be part of the Remax panel. And I was told to keep it brief this morning by Ryan because there's a big session scheduled for this morning. So just from our side, I'd just like to say thank you once again for the opportunity. And we're looking forward to Delaney's chat this morning. And yeah, please take notes and enjoy the session. Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. Great to have you with us. And thanks again for being part of this very essential training. So before I hand over to Delaney, always important to introduce our guest speaker. Delaney completed her LLB degree at the University of Pretoria. She was on the Dean's Merit List for 4 consecutive years and is a member of the Golden Key Honor Society. She was admitted as a notary public and conveyancer in 2018 and 2019, respectively. Delaney, because of her hard work and dedication, heads up the conveyancing and transfer department under the leadership of Mrs. Joyce Poseidon-Notes, and I'm sure a lot of you know Joyce. And Delaney has a key eye for a technical side of law and gives training to property practitioners and has an overall passion for property law. Delaney, welcome. So awesome to have you with us. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ryan, and hello, everyone. I am not going to bore you with my face the whole time, so I'm immediately going to switch over and share my screen to you all. Okay, so we're doing essentials of an OTP today. So hopefully those who already have a bit of a background, have been in the field for quite some time, you won't be bored. There will be still something new to learn. And those that are new, hopefully you'll get the bare essentials out of it that you can use further on. So this is sort of just the intro of what we're going to do today. We're doing Essentialia, which is just a fancy way of saying the bare essentials that each contract needs to be valid. So we're going to look at specifically parties, property, and purchase price, your 3 Ps that needs to be in a contract. We're going to look at the method of payment, continue marketing clause that goes hand in hand with method of payments, and we're going to look at a few other important clauses. So I'm jumping right ahead into it. Essentialia, or like I say, the bare essentials. So when you look at the legislation, it says, and hopefully everyone knows, it needs to be in writing. When you want to sell a property, immovable property, it must be in writing. Whether that is now your pen to paper, or whether it is typed out, or even a serviette with a pen to it, it needs to be written. Now, the 3 Ps that we talk about that needs to be in your contract, again, bare minimum, is parties, property, and purchase price. If you are sitting at a bar and you have 2 people there that want to buy a property, you take a serviette and a pen and you write purchaser A and seller B wants to buy property XY for this amount. You have a valid and binding contract immediately. So with saying that is your bare essentials. But please, like everyone knows, that is not the only thing you're going to put in your contract. We have contracts with more clauses in for a reason. And those reasons are clients need to know what they're getting themselves into, what they need to do, what they can't do, what's expected of them. And more importantly, at least from the conveyancing side, we can only enforce what is written in your contract. So if the parties agree to leave the pot plants in the property and it's not written in the contract, and after registration, that seller goes and they take all their pot plants and the purchaser comes back and they say, listen, where's the pot plants? They're immediately going to come to the attorneys for assistance. We'll go to the contract. If the contract doesn't refer to the pot plants, we can't force the seller to leave the pot plants. So please help your clients, cover yourself, put whatever agreements there are in your contract. Don't work on the bare essentials only, please, guys. So I put an example there of fixtures and fittings. You'll see throughout the slides, there's white blocks. Now, hopefully this looks familiar to you. It is snapshots out of your contracts that you use, or similar contracts or similar clauses. So there I put a fixtures and fittings clause, which in some of your contracts might be clause 11, but it might differ a bit, but the situation will remain the same. So why am I putting fixtures and fittings here? Well, this is a clause that is sometimes overlooked and seen as, oh, this is not important. I can almost guarantee you, if I'm going to ask everyone here today, do you consider blinds to be included or excluded when you sell a property? We're going to get different answers, because blinds, like satellite dishes, like mirrors, like portraits, like chandeliers, all of those things are gray areas. If the parties don't agree to it and it's not written, it's a gray area and it needs to be disputed or fought over in court. As the conveyancers, we can only work on the contract. So if it's not in the contracts and parties are in a dispute about it, it's going to become a problem. And it seems very easy. Mirrors, usually people say, well, if it's a mirror in a bathroom, it's included. Okay, but make sure both your parties understand that. We've seen a lot of cases where people, your sellers, will remove certain things that you didn't expect. Even more important that we've realized is portraits and things. So a lot of purchasers won't want the seller's portraits. So it's easy, you know it's going to be removed. Okay, next question. How's the property, the property or the wall or whatever going to look after the portrait is removed? It might be a different color. There might be holes in it. What needs to be done? The seller's probably going to assume, I'm just taking it off and leaving. Your purchaser might feel, no, they need to get that wall painted or fixed again. Please make sure that you have those type of agreements in writing. It's gray areas and it can cause a lot of issues after the fact. Okay, so please put every agreement you have in writing. Now, the next part of it is, please, it must be signed in wet ink. Okay, so although we have ICTA, which is the Electronic Communication and Telecommunication Act, a lot of people like to refer to this and say, yeah, well, electronic signatures are now valid and accepted. They are correct, but not for sales of properties. A sale of property needs to be in wet ink. So think about it, pen to paper. Okay. Still with being signed, please make sure that when you are dealing with a purchaser that puts in an offer to purchase, they understand that what they are signing, this offer, will automatically become the contract that they are bound by once it is accepted by the seller. We see a lot of purchasers that don't understand this. They think they are just signing an offer and it will only become binding once they sign the transfer documents at the attorneys, which means that seller still thinks they can go around and enter into more offer to purchases, or once they don't want to continue with this one, they're just going to say, listen, guys, I don't want to continue. Please make sure they know once the seller accepts it, it is binding. So they can't just make offers left, right, and center. So it must be in writing. You must agree to parties' property and purchase price. Please agree to more than that. It must be signed in wet ink. And then there is an additional clause that is also in your contracts or in the template one that I saw. You call it a right to revoke. Some people call it a cooling off clause. It doesn't matter what you call it. This doesn't have to be in all your contracts, but there are certain contracts where it is an obligation that it needs to be in. If it's not in, your purchaser can walk away from the contract. So a lot of people, and this would be my suggestion as well, they just keep it in all their contracts, and if it's not applicable, it's not applicable, rather than having to add it if it is applicable. So what is the right to revoke or the cooling off clause? Well, I'm pretty sure it's a clause none of us like. It gives the purchaser the time to make a decision even after they signed the offer. So they will have 5 days to revoke or withdraw their offer, whether it's been accepted by the seller or not. Now, most of you will say, well, we don't want that clause in our contract. And I 100% agree and understand. Unfortunately, in certain cases, you don't have a choice. If a natural purchaser is purchasing a property for residential purposes, and it is for 250,000 or less, they automatically get that 5 business days to revoke or withdraw their offer. Please, guys, this isn't something you can just brush over or take out of your clause by mutual agreement. This is a legal requirement. If you do not show your purchaser this, if it is applicable, they can later on withdraw from the deal, and you will not have a claim and you will have a very upset seller. So if you are dealing with properties that are in the range of 250,000 or less, please take note of this clause. It is very important. Then, still with the bare essentials, is your mandatory disclosure form. So it is literally in the word, it is now mandatory to have a disclosure form or a property condition report or immovable condition report or whatever you want to call it. It boils down to the seller needs to declare everything that is known to him or her, specifically with regards to defects. This does not mean your purchaser can just take this disclosure form and not even do an inspection. If he or she doesn't do an inspection, they take that risk. Because after registration, if something pops up and the seller wasn't aware of it and therefore he didn't declare it, your purchaser is unfortunately the one that will be responsible. So I'm going to give you an example that I am sure has popped up or will pop up in the future, unfortunately. Property is sold. Seller declares there are no leaks in the roof. Property is registered. Major rainstorm. Now the purchaser calls you and says, listen, there is a leak. Water is rushing in. The seller didn't declare this. First thing you or the attorneys will do is we'll go back to the seller and say, listen, seller, this is the situation. I can almost guarantee you the seller's going to come back and say, well, I didn't know. We didn't have leaks in my time. Unfortunately, this means purchaser, because it's registered, you are now the owner. You are unfortunately responsible. You can't hold the seller responsible. You will only be allowed to hold a seller responsible after registration if the seller knew of the defect and didn't disclose it with the intention to defraud. A seller can only declare what is known to him or her. Use the mandatory disclosure form to the benefit of the seller and the purchaser. The more that's declared there, the less the seller can be held liable for up until registration as the owner. The purchaser again can use this form to determine if he or she wants to do further inspections. Please use this form properly. Okay.
So I'm gonna jump in here quickly. I have two questions for you, but I'll ask the first one. And for those that have questions, please just save them for the end of Delaney's presentation, and we'll go back and answer whatever we can. So the first question I have for you is, what do you do when a client cannot sign with you because he or she is away in another city, on vacation, or in another country?
Okay, so this is something that pops up quite a lot because it needs to be signed in wet ink. Now, when we say wet ink, I mean your pen needed to be on the paper at a certain time. So that means your seller or your purchaser, whoever is not available to sign in your presence, will print out the document, take the pen, sign it. They don't have to give you back the original signed document. Once it's scanned and emailed to you, it doesn't become automatically an electronic signature. It's still deemed signed in wet ink. So that is usually what you'll do. You'll get that seller or purchaser, print it out, sign it, scan it back in. You're still working with wet ink. So the key word is pen to paper somewhere. So if someone wants to use those electronic pens on a tablet, that is not a pen to paper. Please, guys, pen, wet ink to paper.
Yeah, pen to paper, everyone, pen to paper. And then just with regards to the mandatory disclosure form, what if the seller does not reside in the property?
Okay, so this is actually a nice question because that happens a lot. I am currently in the position where I am also selling a property that I've never viewed. I have tenants in. So my suggestion is you be honest and you give as much information as you can. So for instance, if you have tenants, do a proper inspection with your tenants. It should have been an ingoing or exit inspection at a certain stage, and you can always ask to do an inspection on another time. Get that report, attach it to your mandatory disclosure form. Stipulate, I have never seen the property or I've never resided in the property. There are currently tenants in the property, and this is the report compiled from the tenants, or this is what the tenants declared, and you put it in the contract. And even more important, you throw it back to the purchasers and say they need to do a proper inspection. Make sure your purchasers understand that this is their responsibility. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Then I'm going to go through, we did the essentials, so the bare minimum now. So if I go back, you'll see that second bullet where I say parties, property, purchase price. I'm going to focus on those three today. So firstly, we're going to do parties. Now, you'll see I took some extracts here from your contract, so this should look familiar. We are going to talk about your natural people, your individuals, and then we're going to talk about your legal persons or juristic entities, your companies, trusts, and CCs. So when we talk about natural people, we are going to focus on marital status, which you'll see I circled there. And when we talk about juristic entities, we're going to talk about who authorizes the contracts. So first things first, natural persons. It is very important for us how the parties are married or what their marital status is, because this will tell us who needs to sign, who has authority to sign. Does someone need to be added to the contract? So this is very, very important. You can't just say this is something I'll do after the fact. If you have a contract that's not properly signed, you don't have a proper contract. And even if that deal then falls through due to breach of contract for someone else, you will not have a commission claim. So from the beginning, do it correctly. So we're going to look at the top marital statuses, I would say. You'll see there in brackets, I just say there is currently a marriage bill. We do not know when it's going to come into effect, and then there might be changes. But currently, this is how it is, so this is how you will continue. So unmarried people, those are the best because they can come to you one at a time or as a group, and they can sign the contract separately. Please just take a note. If you're dealing with someone that says they're unmarried, just ask another question. Have you ever been married? And the reason I'm asking or telling you this is because a lot of people like to call themselves unmarried, even if they just separated. And then they might be in a dispute currently or in a divorce, and it's not finalized yet. So you might have a client that's married in community of property. They are busy getting divorced, and now he or she wants to sell or purchase a property without the spouse because they're in any event getting divorced. No, that's not valid. You can't. So please just ask that second question as well. Then you get your civil marriages or your civil unions. There is no difference for us. It is your heterosexual marriages or your same-sex marriages or partnerships. But for our purposes, for conveyancing purposes or for signing the offer to purchase, we refer to them exactly the same. They are either married in community of property or married out of community of property. When they are married in community of property, it means they have no antenuptial contract, or they like to refer to it as the Americans do, we do not have a prenup, okay? In that case, you will need both spouses to sign the contract. They cannot act separately. If they have a prenup or an antenuptial contract, we then deal with them as if they're married out of community of property, which means they can act separately. So the husband can come to you and buy or sell a property without the wife and vice versa. So just make note, just ask, do you have a prenup or an ANC or don't you? Then Muslim marriages. This is something that pops up more often than not. Please, our legislation has changed. They are now considered married. Okay, so if a Muslim couple or one Muslim person comes to you and they say, no, I've just entered into a Muslim marriage, or they will refer to it with a nikah certificate, they are deemed married. Now, we are still waiting for legislation to tell us what type of marriage it is. Is it married in? Is it married out? But thank goodness, while we are waiting, we deal with them the same way we would deal with a couple that's married out of community of property. Now, please don't tell a Muslim couple they are married out of community of property. They are not necessarily, but that is how we deal with them. So what that means is you will declare them as married, but if the husband wants to buy or sell without the wife, he or she is allowed to do so. And the same on the wife's side. So please just don't refer to them as unmarried. That will be incorrect. Your contract will be incorrect, and the bond application that might follow might be incorrect as well. Then another one that pops up quite a lot lately, your traditional or customary marriages. Now, this is actually not so complicated. What makes it seem complicated is with all other marriages, there will be a certificate to confirm they are married. However, with a traditional or customary marriage, we don't require a marriage certificate because they might not have one. But this doesn't mean they are not married. Please, if a couple comes to you and they say, I have a customary marriage or a lobola marriage or whatever they want to refer to it, and they tell you, but I don't have the certificate, do not tell them they are unmarried. Or, okay, fine, let's say you're unmarried, then you don't have to include your wife or your husband. That will be deemed as fraud. Guys, please watch out for this. A lot of clients are trying to bend the rules here because there aren't certificates to act as if they are not married so that they don't have to include the wife or the husband. Now, you don't have to become investigators to determine if they're lying or not. It will be on them, but please do not encourage their lies. So, how do we know if they are married or not? Well, pretty much you're going to ask, are you married in terms of customs or traditions? If they say yes, yes, they are. Some clients might say no because they don't think it's a valid or recognized marriage, but then they'll continue to say, I only have a lobola marriage. Then you have a duty, especially if you're in this training today, to tell them, listen, then you are married. So with traditional marriages, it's exactly the same as civil or your civil marriage or your civil unions. It is either married in community of property or out of community of property, and the same rules apply. If they entered into an antenuptial contract or a prenup before they got married, they are married out. If not, they are married in. So the way in which we deal with customary marriages, although it seems so terrifying, is exactly the same as your civil marriage or your civil union. So don't fret too much about it. If you have difficult clients or you're uncertain, please always just contact us first. Then we can help you or the client from the get-go. Then we get your foreign marriages, especially if you're dealing with investors. You will have someone that gives you a marriage certificate from another country. Now, very important, in South Africa, we do not care what type of marriage that foreign marriage is. So we don't care whether in Switzerland it is deemed married in or married out. We just want to know, is it a South African or foreign marriage? If it's a South African marriage, we know that you're either unmarried, married in, married out, Muslim or traditional marriage. We know this. If it's a foreign marriage, we don't care. We just know it's a foreign marriage. Okay, so it means less questions. You don't have to ask them what type of marriage, just in which country. Now, important with this, if someone is selling or purchasing a property and they are in a foreign marriage, his or her spouse needs to co-sign. So we call it they need to assist. So that spouse won't become one of the parties now, it pretty much, you can see it as they consent to the sale or the purchase. That is pretty much what it boils down to. So if you get an investor that comes to you and he says, listen, I want to buy a property, I'm in a foreign marriage, I don't want my wife included. The wife won't become a party, but you need to inform him that the wife will have to co-sign almost everything as consent. So he'll be safeguarded. She won't be a party to the contract. She won't become the owner, but she needs to consent to it. Now, I've just told you the general rule. If that person is going to take out a bond, just make sure the banks have their own requirements. So you'll see that the last bullet, I refer to F&B. So currently, if that investor takes out a bond at F&B, F&B will require the spouse to become a co-applicant. Okay, so watch out, because if you get an investor that comes to you and say, listen, I don't want my spouse involved, you had this training, so you can tell him, listen, sir, she won't become a party, but she needs to sign as consent. You get him happy with that. She signs, but then he takes out an F&B bond. Now the bank requires her to become a co-applicant. Please, he's going to be very upset. So either the purchaser doesn't need to apply to F&B, or first find out how the banks will deem it, or get the purchaser to buy cash. Okay, so that's why I refer to F&B specifically. The banks keep on changing, but currently that is the situation. So if you're dealing with investors or foreigners, please look at foreign marriages specifically. Okay.
So Delaney, if the client gives an ANC, is that sufficient?
So usually we ask for various different documents, especially if you refer to civil marriages. So giving an ANC is one of the documents we need, but it is not sufficient to only give an ANC. We will also need the marriage certificate, because anyone can enter into an ANC or a prenup or an antenuptial contract or a marriage agreement, whatever you want to call it. Anyone can enter into it. It doesn't mean they are married. It goes hand in hand. So we will need a marriage certificate and an ANC. So we will always need both. Okay. Perfect. Then, so with your natural people, with parties, we specifically look at the type of marriages. Please look at this, guys. If you're uncertain, ask us beforehand, because like I say, you put yourself, the transaction, and the parties at risk if you don't complete it properly or not the right people sign. So still with parties, if we go to legal entities or juristic people, we're looking at companies, trusts, CCs, those type of people. Now, I like to think of it as a trust being like a circle, or a company being a circle, or CC being a circle. Now, that entity can't sign anything. It's not a person. So you need a person within that company, CC or trust, to sign on that circle's behalf. So please make sure the person that signs has the authority to sign. So you get those people out there that just want to feel very fancy. They sign contracts left, right, and center, but they have no authority. Now, how do you know if they have authority? Usually it will be in the form of a resolution. Now, if you don't get the resolution before the contract is signed, it is something from the attorney's side that we do get even after the fact, once they sign the transfer documents. 9 out of 10 cases, that is sufficient. Okay. Just protect yourself, because should something pop up and that purchaser or seller does not want to continue with the deal and they want to get out of it with any technical point, they might come back and say, oh, but we never had a resolution. There was no authority for this person to sign this contract. So this contract is then binding on the company, CC, or trust. And if there's no resolution at that time, they will be able to walk away. So protect yourself. It is not a train smash if you don't get it. We get it. But in those cases where a difficult client tries to walk away, they will be able. So please protect yourself. What I've done for certain agencies or certain agents is we've given blank resolutions out. So they give it, if they deal with a company, a CC, or a trust, they give it with the contract and they say, get this resolution signed with the contract. Once again, 9 out of 10 cases, it's not an issue. I'm just being devil's advocate. I'm giving you worst case scenario, get the resolution. Now, still with legal entities, obviously legal entities consist of members or people, and they are also people with marital status. That might be important, especially if you're dealing with purchasers who want to take out a bond. So if the director or the member or the trustee in that company or CC or trust is married in community of property, they will most probably, for the bond, have to sign surety with the company, CC, or trust. That's fine. But if that person is married in community of property, their spouse will have to give consent. So once again, please take note of this. Marital status is still important even with legal entities. This might not be a problem, but you might sit with a client that does not want to include his or her spouse. Then we also get, and I like this, I have to say I like this. You might sit with a purchaser that comes to you and say, listen, I am busy registering a company, but I want to buy this house. Then usually you'll have to say, okay, but first you need this company to be registered because this will be the purchaser. Well, if you want to secure an offer to purchase already while we're waiting for that company to be registered, you can. So a company to be formed can purchase a property. You can get a purchaser to sign Delaney Janssen van Rensburg as soon-to-be director of a company to be formed. You can, and you'll have a valid and binding contract once Delaney signs. What you will do is you will put an additional clause in to have a timeline to it. Please don't have company to be formed. That purchaser might take years to form that company. Have a timeline in 2 weeks, a month, whatever your seller and your purchaser agrees to. You usually work with a maximum of 3 months, but put your own timeline in so that both parties know within 2 weeks that company needs to be formed. If it's not formed, you still have a valid and binding contract. Delaney, who signed on behalf of that company, still needs to proceed. So this is a wonderful clause to put in if you get a purchaser that's very, very interested in a property, but they want it in a company's name. Then you can tell them we can already sign a contract. Once the company is signed, we continue with it in the company's name. If the company is never formed, you continue with it in your own name. So point is, once you enter into that contract, you have a valid and binding contract. This is very nice to have. Please just take note, it is only for companies to be formed. If you have a purchaser that comes to you and say, listen, I am busy registering a trust, so it will be a trust to be formed. Sorry, we cannot do the same. We have to wait for it to be registered. And the same with the CC. Reason for the CC is very obvious. There are no new CCs being created. But trusts, there are still new ones being created. Unfortunately, we need to wait until it's registered before you can sign an offer to purchase. Okay.
So if someone is married in community of property, but they want to purchase a property without his or her spouse, can they buy in a company?
So I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say no. And I'm going to refer to the third bullet. So when we deal with legal entities and someone there is married in, if they go with a bank, so a bond application, the spouse will most likely have to be included, not as a party, but just to consent to the surety. So if a client comes to you and say, listen, I am buying in a company's name, I am married in community of property, but I don't want my wife or husband to be included. They can, but the only option will be either you get consent from the bank that the wife will not have to sign, or a clear-cut option, buy cash. If you buy cash, that spouse does not have to consent to anything. So that will be your best option for the client. Don't just say yes and then deal with it later on. Give the options from the beginning. Okay. So still with parties, that's still our first P of parties, property, purchase price. Deceased estates. So for some of you, this might never pop up. For others, this might be every second deal. So I just thought, let me refer to it. If you have someone coming to you, it's usually the spouse of the deceased or the heirs. So the daughter or the son or whoever. They'll come to you and they'll say, my mom passed away, we want to sell the house. You can, okay? But only the executor can sign the contract as the seller. The spouse and the heirs are not automatically executors, and they are not authorized to sign the contract. They might be the people you are in contact with, but they can't sign the contract. The executor, after receiving the letter of executorship from the master's office, will be able to sign. So you'll see there is another extract where your property of your purchase and your seller clauses are in your offer to purchase. And one of the options is an estate number. So if you're dealing with deceased estate, you will have an estate number, which will be stipulated there, and your seller will be, let's say, Delaney Jansen van Rensburg in her capacity as executor of X, Y, and Z. Now, that's the one thing that's important with deceased estates. The other thing is, please make sure that your purchaser knows they are buying from a deceased estate. Why? Because the timelines are a bit different. Whereas you look at 4 to 8 weeks for a normal deal, when you deal with deceased estates, it can go anything between 3 to 4 months and even longer, because we have to get consent from the master. Now, luckily, you don't have to deal with getting consent. That is something the attorneys do together with the executor or the estate administrators. But please, it is a duty of an agent to at least inform the purchasers that the timeline might be a bit longer. Okay, so with that, we are done with our first P, which is parties. Then we are going to move over to property. Now, with property, I think the main thing I just want to make sure you take from this is please make sure you have the correct or full property description. Now, this is as easy as doing a deed search, asking an attorney to do a search, doing a Lightstone search. Please, this is especially important if you are taking a bond or if the purchaser is also taking a bond. If you have the incorrect description there, it will be the incorrect description at the bank, and this will cause delays. Okay, even if you work with door numbers, please make sure you have the correct legal description as well, how it is registered. Once again, it's as easy as doing that one additional search. Please do it. If you're dealing with sectional titles, this is even more important. Sectional titles sometimes have what we call exclusive use areas to it. So you can think of a house with a garden or a house with a carport or parking, garage, something like that, that the developer registered separately from the unit. So that means you will be selling the unit together with an exclusive use area. If you do not refer to this exclusive use area in your contract as well, your contract is defective. The sale might go through without the garage, carport, or parking going through with it, which will cause a lot of issues and delays. Again, with a bank, if the bank receives the OTP and they see there's no garage, carport, parking, or whatever, that will not be on their instructions. And that might mean we need to get amendments to the bank, which will cause a delay. Please avoid these type of issues. Very, very easy. Call the attorneys, call us to do a search for you. Don't just work on the instructions you get from a seller. A seller just knows he has this property and there is a garage with it. He or she doesn't know that it is registered separately. So you can ask them, that will be your first thing that you do. But secondly, do the necessary searches. Now, if you use something like Lightstone, unfortunately, it will not necessarily show you exclusive use areas. But then please contact us, or if needs be, contact other attorneys, ask them to check if there's an exclusive use area. We can do that search for you free of charge. It is so much better to do that from the beginning and avoid delays or issues with something that's not being transferred. About a month ago, we had a matter where it was a unit with a garden attached to it. No one knew, but it was registered separately. So the house was seen as a unit and the garden attached to it was seen as an exclusive use area. And no one knew that it was separate, so only the house was transferred to the purchaser, which means actually that seller remained the owner of the garden, which he didn't want, and the purchaser actually didn't have access to his garden, legally access to the garden. So please, luckily we didn't do the transfer, we did the litigation of it afterwards, but please avoid those type of things because it will boil down to another transfer that needs to happen, another fee that needs to be paid. And no, you will not be entitled to second commission. Actually, the client was very, very, very upset with the agent as well. So please just do that additional search or ask us to do that search for you, please. Okay, so we've done property, we've done parties, we've done property. Then I am moving over to purchase price. Okay, so another thing that needs to be agreed in your contract is your purchase price and the method of payment. So method of payment, there are various ways people can do it: cash, bond, sale of existing properties, etc. Please just make sure it is agreed in your contract. Okay, then when we go to method of payment, if you're going to use a suspensive condition like getting a bond, please make sure, and this is something that pops up quite often, do not enter into loaded deals. So this pretty much means you are going to say the purchase price is 1 million, but the purchaser wants an additional amount of 50,000 to cover the cost. So let's call the purchase price 1,050,000. That is not allowed, okay? Not at the banks, not at the attorneys. If you want to include cost, you're going to say the purchase price being 1 million plus costs. Then when we get instructions from the bank will also say it is the purchase price plus costs. Please safeguard yourself in that situation. So, because there are various ways in which you can pay or secure the purchase price, if we look at a bond or if we look at the successful sale of the property, you usually look at something we call suspensive conditions. So that pretty much means one thing needs to happen for the deal to proceed. If it doesn't happen, the deal will lapse automatically. So if they need to get bond and they do not get bond approval, it will lapse and you will not continue with the contract and there will be no claim. Please, if you want to allow a purchaser additional time to get the bond or sell his or her property, if you want to give that extension, it needs to be provided before the time lapses. Because once the time lapses, the contract lapses. You can't do an extension to a dead contract. Now, I know some of you have done it before. I can say I've done it before, but being very technical, you can't. So in 9 out of 10 cases, it will work. But if you have a client that wants to get out of a deal, this is a technicality they can use to get out of a deal. Please, extensions to be done beforehand. Now, I'm putting this in contrast with special conditions. So special conditions is whichever other condition you put in your contract. So a good example is the provision of building plans. If you say building plans need to be provided at a certain time and it is not, your contract will not lapse. It's not a suspensive condition, but it will mean that that seller is in breach of contract because they didn't adhere to this condition. Now, then you will have a claim. You will have a claim for commission and whichever other party will also have a claim. With this, you can also do extensions, and this can be done before or after the time period lapses. Because even if the time period lapses, the contract doesn't lapse. So you can see your special condition as you will see any other condition in your contract. It is something that needs to be done, point blank. Your suspensive condition is something that needs to be done for the contract to continue. So please, these two differ. Now, because we're dealing with stuff like suspensive conditions that can delay a transaction, there are clauses. And again, another extract. There are clauses, we call it continue marketing clause, a backdoor clause, 72-hour clause that you can put in for your seller. Now, this is nice. I like it because you pretty much say, I am keeping this contract that I already have in my back pocket. But while I'm waiting, I'm going to check what is still out there. If I get another offer and it's a better offer, I can continue with that offer. Now, it's not automatically that you can just continue. Usually, if you get another offer, you need to give notice to your current purchaser and say, listen, this is a new offer I got. Can you match this? If you can, it's fine. We can continue. If not, then this deal will lapse and I will continue with a new offer. So this is a nice one if you want to safeguard your seller while still giving additional time to your purchaser. So remember when I spoke about a company to be formed? If you have a purchaser that's a company to be formed, meaning until the company is formed, you can't really proceed with the transaction. So there's automatically a delay. So it's very nice to put this type of clause with that type of purchaser. So please remember this. It's nice. It's a nice back pocket one. So please do not give notice to your first or your current offer until your second offer is not secure. Okay.
So Delaney, just to jump in quickly, there are a few questions here with regards to the recording of this webinar. So the webinar is being recorded. It will automatically be sent to you after the webinar. And also, please, the Remax Hub is a powerful tool. This will be under e-learning. You will find this under e-learning, and this entire webinar will be there for you. So for those that are putting your email addresses in, you don't have to. All right. This will automatically be sent to you after the call. And then also it'll be on the Remax Hub. So Delaney, just with regards to notice, when must notice be given?
So my advice is usually, if you have this in your back pocket, you only want to give notice once that second deal is secure. And I'm going to put this in a practical example. You have an offer to purchase where Currently, you have to wait until the end of the year for a bond approval. Now you get a second offer in, and this client says, okay, but I'll get a bond within this first month. Perfect. Keep both deals. Do not give notice to your first offer yet, because remember, this second offer still has until the end of month to get the bond. There's no guarantee that they will get a bond. So if you give notice now already, and that second offer doesn't get a bond, you've lost both deals. So my advice, only give notice once your second deal is secure. So if they have to get a bond at the end of the month, wait until they have a bond approval, and then you give notice to your first deal. Then you know if your first deal lapses, your second deal will automatically carry on. It is a secure deal. Safeguard your seller, guys, please. Then on the last side, this is just other important clauses. Now, these are clauses we like to just scroll over. We don't even refer our clients to it, but it's clauses that are actually quite important and have quite a big impact. So the first one is your Consumer Protection Act. If you have a seller that's selling a property in their ordinary course of business, so think of someone like a developer. This means the Consumer Protection Act, or the CPA, is applicable. Now, look at that second bullet. If the CPA is applicable, Footstewards is not. Please, guys, inform your sellers. They will not be able to scurry away and refer to Footstewards if the CPA is applicable. Please watch out for that. So it's very important to determine if they are selling in their ordinary course of business or not. Another clause with regards to tax, we call it withholding tax. If you have a seller that's residing outside of RSA, please remember this clause. If such a seller is selling a property for more than 2 million rand, there will be withholding tax. Currently, that is, I think, 7.5% of the total purchase price that tax will automatically, or that SARS will automatically take. Please make sure your sellers know this. Now, a developer's right to extend, that is another important clause. Why do we refer to it? Well, if you don't, your purchaser can cancel the deal at any stage, even if it's already on prep to be registered tomorrow or within the next hour. If your purchaser then picks this up, they can cancel and no one will have a claim. Just to explain what it is, if a developer has a right to extend, you can see it as this purchaser is now purchasing a property, and in front of it is an open field, and there are running around and flowers, and that's actually why they're purchasing the property. Now, they have no idea that the developer intends to build on that portion in front of them, and they will lose that view. So in your OTP, you need to inform them that the developer has the right to extend. You don't have to tell them where they are extending or exactly what the plans are, as you will not know. They just need to know that they have this right to extend. Please leave this in your contracts. If you're unsure if it should be applicable or not, please let us know. We can check for you if it's applicable, if you need to put it in or not. Safeguard your deals, guys. Okay.
So is Footstewards never applicable?
Okay, so if your Consumer Protection Act is applicable, my answer is no, Footstewards is not applicable. But there are ways in which you can still include Footstewards in your contract, but you'll have to be very specific. You'll have to refer to that Footstewards clause to your seller, your purchaser, and get them to sign specifically there with all the defects and not. So if you have a deal like that, you're more than welcome to contact us to make sure whether Footstewards can be included or not. Okay.
So Delaney, we have, which is great, I'm seeing in the comments here, we have quite a few new agents, brand new agents on the call here. So just to go back again, what is withholding tax?
Okay, so withholding tax is pretty much, I like to think of it as South Africans residing in South Africa pay capital gains tax. Unfortunately, that's something we do. So if you make a profit or you gain anything, SARS wants a piece of it. Now, this is just for people residing in South Africa. So if you have someone that's not residing in South Africa, but they will still get money from a property in South Africa, SARS still wants a portion of it. And that's why we have withholding tax. So if a seller sits overseas and they don't pay tax in South Africa pretty much, so we call them non-residents, and they sell a property for more than 2 million, SARS automatically deems it as they will gain something from it. And SARS will then request a portion of their purchase price to be paid out to them. Now, tax consultants can help sellers with this. So you can actually apply to SARS and ask that they waive this withholding tax amount or that they make it less. So any tax consultant will be able to assist. From the attorney side, we can also lodge the forms for the clients to SARS, but we are not tax consultants. So the deal they might get with SARS won't be as beneficial as with tax consultants, but it is something we can assist with. But please make sure your sellers, if it's a non-resident or non-South African resident, and you're lucky enough to have a purchase price above 2 million, ding, 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 please remember this clause.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then with that, I am done. And just 2 minutes longer or 3 minutes than it should have been. I don't know if there are questions at this stage, Ryan. I will hand it over to you to guide me.
Thank you so much, Delaney. Yes, we will be taking a couple of questions. So if you can just unshare your screen again so we get to the full picture. I'm going to go through the chats. And please, Kim, would you please, I know you sent your email address already in the comments bar. So if you could just send Delaney's as well, and then everyone can see what's going on in terms of both your email addresses. And I'll, of course, send an email as well to the network, in a couple of days' time. But like I said, the recording will be sent, and also this will be on e-learning in the hub. Okay, so let's go through the chats bar here quickly. I'm going to just randomize. So please don't think I'm trying to be a favorite to anyone. I'm just randomizing the chats here and seeing if we maybe have covered it already or not. But I'd like to go through some of the questions. So Ines, what happens when the seller is living overseas and he needs to sign the OTP? Would an electronic signature be legal in this case? I think we have covered it, but I think it's a great question because it happens.
It is. So electronic signatures are never allowed, okay? So what you will do is that seller will print out the OTP that you send. They will sign with a pen to paper, and they will scan it back to you or take a photo. And that will be deemed sufficient. Please do not accept an electronic signature.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to a live question here. So Kahlejo, I've just allowed you to talk. So if you could ask your question to Delaney.
Yes. What I wanted to find out, so with regards to the withholding tax, suppose you had bought the property for less than 2 million, say hypothetically for 1.5 million, and you made extensions on the house that to the amount of say 600,000. What then happens with the withholding tax? Do you still pay for that?
Yeah, so the rule on the conveyancing side, or the rules with SARS, are clean break or straightforward. If they are selling for more than 2 million, there will be withholding tax. Now, I just quickly refer to the fact that you can apply to SARS to waive or lessen that amount. Now, that is a prime example of when you'll want to lessen the amount. Usually, I bought the property, I actually spent a lot of money on it to be able to sell it for more. So that's the type of things you with your tax consultant or the seller with his tax consultant will then do. So we can lodge it to SARS to request, we call it a tax directive, where SARS will then hopefully come back and say, listen, although the norm is 7.9%, you only have to pay this amount or even zero. So Please, if you have a seller like that and they say, okay, but I built on it or I spent money on it, ask them, do they have a tax consultant to assist them? Do they have all of that? Because it will definitely be taken into account and they might not even have to pay 7.9%.
Awesome, thanks. I have a very interesting question here from Akeem. So, in a situation where a client declares him or herself unmarried and signs a loan for property purchase either by cash or bond, but the client is in fact married traditionally, does that have any after effects on the client or the property purchase altogether?
Okay. So, if the client, let's say the client lied, okay, knowing full well, because on the attorney side, we also ask a certain questions. Let's say he or she lies to everyone. It will have no effect on you as the agent or me as the attorneys. It will most definitely have an effect on the client. Because even if the client bought the property saying he or she is single or unmarried, it will be deemed as married in community of property if that's the case, and the wife or husband will automatically become a party. And whether it's cash or bond, any other party, so creditors or even the bank, can come after him for his or her fraud. So yes, it will have an impact. And if we determine that before registration, then there will be a delay because we'll have to add the spouse. If it pops up after registration, it will have an impact on the client, but not on you as agent or as attorneys if we were all misled. Please don't be a part of the misleading though, because then you will be bound to it as well.
Awesome, thanks. I've also just, Kim, I brought you in. So if you also want to weigh in anyway, please feel free. And we'll take a couple of more questions. So if you want to raise your hand, and then I can allow you to talk and ask a live question if you want. But I'm going to go through the comments here and just see if there are any other questions. So interesting one. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but what is the cost process of transferring a property from one person to another?
So we work on scales. It's prescribed scales. So it's going to depend on the purchase price. So if you want to know that more or less upfront, we do have a cost calculator on our website. We have cost sheets that we can share, or you can be very specific about it. I do have agents that do it so they can guide their clients. Tell me, listen, I have a sectional title deal and they are selling the property for 2 million. Please give me a quote. And we do that free of charge. Then you'll have something that you can give your purchaser from the get-go. Please remember, when it comes to costs, there will be transfer costs that your purchaser needs to pay. There will be bond costs if your purchaser is taking out a bond. And if your seller has a bond that needs to be cancelled, there will be bond cancellation costs as well. So there might be 3 different accounts that needs to be paid.
Okay, great. So I'm going to take one more question. We are a little bit over time, but when we're learning and upskilling and developing our own knowledge of the industry, sometimes going over time isn't a bad thing. So one question here from Clinton: what do you do when client puts in an offer for a property but is in the process of getting divorced? The divorce will be official before the property registers.
Okay, so it's going to depend on the type of marriage as well. So first things first, be upfront with your seller as well. Okay, so if your purchaser is busy getting divorced and you say he's gonna be divorced before it transfers, it means no matter what, we'll have to wait until the divorce goes through before we can transfer. Please make sure your seller is aware of that, because Murphy's Law, they go to court to get divorced and it gets postponed. And now we have to wait even longer. So please be upfront with your seller. That is rule number 1. Then secondly, it's going to depend on how he or she is married. Okay, so most likely we will not be able to sign documents before he is unmarried, because therein you have to declare the marital status, and we will not be able to lodge or register before he is divorced. So just take note, you can do that, be upfront with your seller, but also take note that we can only proceed once he is divorced.
Okay, great. So at Remax, we always like throwing things in there and a little bonus. The last question, the lady, I promise you, is from Renelle. She says, I have a buyer that has been divorced, but doesn't have the necessary documents to show, and he can't remember who the lawyer was.
Okay, so strangely enough, that happens a lot. So normally what we then try to do is we go to court to find that file. So hopefully he has a case number at least, or some of the documentation, even if it's not that paperwork, or we can go on his and his previous spouse's surnames. So unfortunately, one way or another, we will need some form of documentation to give to the deeds office. I had a deal like that last year where actually, because I know Johannesburg's court is currently, there's a hell of a backlog. You can't get copies of, for instance, divorce orders or anything else. And I had a couple, or I had a one person that was selling. She was already divorced. And we actually went as far as contacting the previous husband, getting affidavits, everything, submitting that to the deeds office, asking them, please, we can't get copies. They don't have. And the deeds office just said no. So we will need to try and get a copy. If they can remember which court they went to, or if he can remember, you can always request attorneys to go and check at that court for you.
And most of the times we literally have to go digging in rooms and vaults with boxes. So if we've told you at the end of the day it can't be done, then rest assured we've really exhausted every single avenue.
Thanks, Kim. And thanks for jumping in there, because we're going to wrap things up here. So Kim, anything from your side before we end off?
I just think thank you for everyone's time this morning. I hope that you've all learned something, or you've had the opportunity to think of something differently. And I think, Ryan, just once again from our side, thank you. I think these training sessions are very informative, and it definitely helps the agents going forward to fulfill the offer to purchases correctly, so that when we get it in our office, our turnaround times are quicker. At the end of the day, we can't have delays. We all need to make money. And I think for you as property practitioners as well, the quicker your deals can register in the deeds office, the better. And how do we do that, and how do you help us to do that, is by knowing what information to fulfill on an offer to purchase. So I'm keen for Boshoff to do as many training sessions, as webinars, as Ryan and Remax SA will allow. So we love doing it. And once again, thank you for everyone's time this morning.
Thank you so much, Kim. There definitely will be a part 2 to this, maybe even a part 3, 4, who knows? We'll see, what's around the corner as we, especially edging towards the end of the year now. But from Remax SA side, firstly, I want to say thank you to all the agents, the brokers, the broker managers, the admin, and especially the newer agents that have joined this call. And I'm pretty sure the experienced agents also picked up a few things today, which is really important, especially when it comes to the essentials of an offer to purchase. And then secondly and lastly, I want to say a massive thank you to Boshoff, to Kim Delaney. That was absolutely fantastic. I've done so many of these training sessions before. Most of them go over my head because I'm not an agent. But I definitely did pick up on a few things today, which I'm going to be very happy to share with the offices that I look after in my region. So I want to say a massive thank you to you. Thank you for your time. The explanations were clear. When I say I could understand it, I could actually understand it, because sometimes, there's a lot of jargon in there that just goes over our heads. But really, really appreciative, and definitely looking forward to having you for part 2, 3, or 4.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity. And I'm here for part 2, 3, 4, or 10 even.
Thanks so much, Delaney. Thanks so much, everyone. We're going to be ending the call now. Have a fantastic day, and definitely see you soon. Bye for now.